Hi, this is Dan Heisman, and we're here with another YouTube video to help you improve your chess game. This video, we're going to look at one of the most famous games in history, Botvinnik against Capablanca AVRO 1938. When I was growing up, if you asked me what the three most famous games in history were, that would be a tough question, but my guess would be Morphy against the Count Isouard, Duke of Brunswick, Fischer against my coach Donald Byrne, the game of the century, and this would probably be third, Botvinnik-Capablanca AVRO 1938. So as I got to be a better player and I was teaching people of all different levels, or I would meet another strong player and I would be talking about learning chess, if I asked a strong player, what do you think about Botvinnik-Capablanca AVRO, they would talk about the game. If I talked to someone who was rated, 15 or 1600 and they wanted to be a master or an expert, and I said, well, what did you learn from Botvinnik-Capablanca AVRO 1938? They would say, what's that? Or never heard of it, or I didn't play over that game. Yet, when I was going over those couple thousand annotated master games, when I first started, this game was included in several different collections, so I must have played over this game 3 or 4 times in the first couple years that I was getting to be a good player. So that's one of the differences, when you're really working really hard and playing in a million tournaments and going over thousands of games, you're going to see this game in quite a few places, just like you would see, for instance, the Philidor's Legacy combination in many, many different tactics books. So let's take a look at what we can learn from the game. And I'm going to have Stockfish 14 running in the background there on the bottom. And I'm going to play out some of the notes from the book The World's Greatest Chess Games by Burgess, Nunn, and Ems. And it's interesting to have some quotes from Botvinnik in there, so we can also use that for the game. All right, let's get going. We start out with a Nimzo-Indian, knight c3, bishop b4, e3, d5. Okay, if you're going to play d5, you have to understand that White can take that pawn, and therefore if you double his pawns and give him the bishop pair, that he has a chance to undouble the pawns anytime he wants. So here, immediately, Botvinnik plays a3, and you can see Capablanca has nothing better than bishop takes c3 check, although for a second there, Stockfish 14 flashed up bishop e7. But already White has a little bit bigger than normal opening lead, because he's not going to really have double pawns, but he will have the bishop pair. So right now it has White's lead already at 0.38, and that probably also explains why d5 is not the most popular move on move 4 against the e3 variation anymore. But this game was played in 1938. Okay, so let's go on. So Capablanca does take the knight, and Capablanca immediately plays his break move to break up the White center with c5. White undoubles his pawns. The downside of that is it does open up this line for the bishop. White develops his bishop first. He's thinking of developing the knight to e2, so maybe in some lines he could play f3 and e4. Castle. There it is, knight e2. Now a lot of beginners here play c4, saying, I'm going to win a tempo on the bishop. That's not winning a tempo. It's an AWL. It's an attack with something worth less. But winning a tempo is when, you develop a piece and you attack a piece that's already developed that's worth more, and it has to move again, and it can't move to a better square. Well, here, you're not developing the pawn by playing c4. You're just moving it again. And when White moves the bishop, you're both spending a tempo, but what you're really doing is taking the pressure off the center. And we're going to see what Botvinnik says about this in a couple minutes. All right, so in this position, Black plays b6, giving him the option of possibly trading off his bishop since White has pawns on the dark squares in the center and Black's pawn in the middle of the board is on the light square. He's thinking of trading off the bishops. It also would get rid of the bishop pair. So castle, bishop a6. And if White wants, he could play bishop c2. But Stockfish says that Botvinnik plays the right move. He takes, knight takes. And now Stockfish wants to play queen d3. And in the book, they say that queen d3 exclamation point was Botvinnik's later preference. giving black less leeway in how to reply. So Botvinnik later figured out that the move he played here was probably not the best move, and later on he figured out the best move. Of course, Botvinnik didn't have access to anything like Stockfish. All right, so bishop to b2. You might say, why would you develop your bishop there? It's all blocked by pawns. Well, but the pawns can become very flexible, and then maybe the bishop will open up. And if they don't become flexible, then the bishop can move to another square. All right, so bishop b2, queen d7, a4. There's a square the bishop could move to later if he has to. Here, the engine gives rook f c8, and it says already that Capablanca is at least equal, if not slightly better, thanks to Botvinnik not playing queen d3. He plays rook f e8 instead, trying to stop e4. But as we'll see later on, that's not going to be possible. So here, the engine, Stockfish, likes to play c4 already to open up the center for the bishop. Botvinnik plays queen d3, starting to get more and more pieces. He's going to play something like rook a e1 and knight g3 and f3 and e4. Maybe that's his plan. But now black makes a move that makes it much easier for white to do that. Black plays that move we were talking about before, c4. Let me read you what the authors of the book, the authors are Burgess, Nunn, and Ems, they quote Botvinnik, and Botvinnik says, this is a really serious positional error. Black evidently assumed that white would be unable to advance the e-pawn later, and black's superiority would tell on the queen side. However, black's superiority on the queen side happens in this case to be of no great consequence, and the breakthrough with e3 to e4 proves inevitable. Black should have contented himself with the modest defense queen b7. Let's see what Stockfish says. Stockfish says that black's already in a little trouble, and Stockfish doesn't see that c4 is much worse, but I more agree with Botvinnik, and if you watch the rest of the game, which takes a lot of moves, you'll see that eventually c4 does come back to haunt black a little. But we can see that if c4 is Stockfish's best move, and black's up by 0.5, that maybe the bigger mistakes for black did come later, but I do caution people about playing moves like this. All right, so Botvinnik says it's a serious error. Stockfish says black's actually a little bit better. We know Stockfish is really, really good at this stuff, so we're assuming that later Stockfish is going to find some improvements for black. So queen c2, keeping an eye on that e4 square. That's where he wants to break. Now it says black should play knight c7. Capablanca plays knight b8, and you can see already the evaluation shifts from black being better to white being somewhat better on knight b8, so we can consider this at least a minor error. Capablanca plays rook a e1. Botvinnik plays rook a e1. Capablanca plays knight c6. White plays knight g3. Now the rook is guarding this pawn so that on f3 the pawn's not hanging. Stockfish says white has a very slight advantage. Says black should play knight e4 and try to block that square. Now in the book, it says knight e4 is instructively met by knight to h1 with the idea of maybe playing f3 and knight f2. Stockfish isn't too worried about that. It thinks after knight d6, let's say, that black is okay. Instead, in the game, black plays knight a5. Now black's plan is to play knight b3 and stop the queen from guarding the a4 pawn. White says, go ahead and take it, I don't care. So white counterattacks in the center. He plays f3, which is the number one move, and now Stockfish says white's winning. He's already, after knight a5, he jumps way up. So this becomes maybe the big mistake. Black should play knight e4. Okay, so knight a5, f3. Now e4 is inevitable. Knight to b3. White says, go ahead and take my pawn. Stockfish says Capablanca has nothing better, so he takes the pawn. And now we have a typical kingside majority for white. White's going to push up those pawns. He plays e5. knight d7, and now he wants to play like f4, f5, go after the king. He's got the two rooks, the knight, the bishop can come back. White plays queen f2, g6, f4, f5. What would you do in a position like this? Well, the answer is you want to open up the side where you want to attack. If you let black play a move like knight f8, knight e6 here, blockading the pawns, then you're just down a pawn and black's going to use his passed pawn on the queen side, and this is bad for white. So you have to open up the side where you want to attack. Notice white's got all these pieces over here. What do those pieces need? They need open lines. So of course you should take en passant. It would be a master mistake not to do that. Let's see. White's best move is take en passant. His second best move is knight h1. Stockfish says he only loses about half a pawn if he does that. All right, so he takes en passant. Black takes with a knight, and white plays f5. Not really a break move because black can go past, but again, getting his pieces down the board. f5. Black trades rooks, trying to get rid of some of the pressure, trade off the attacking pieces. He says, let's trade some more. Get these pieces off the board because I have a one-pawn advantage for the endgame. Stockfish now says if Botvinnik finds the right move, rook e6, he's completely winning. Look at the difference here. Let's bring up the second best move. Best move, rook e6, white's completely winning. Second best move, fg6. White's only up by about 0.7. So we would call that a critical move. Critical move because you have to find it. Does Botvinnik find the right move? Yes, he does. Rook e6. And now he's threatening the knight. Things are kind of falling apart a little bit for black. We won't go into all the lines. We want to get through the video. So Capablanca plays Stockfish's top move. Rook takes e6, but now he's way behind. F takes e6. He guards the knight, king g7. Again, nothing better. Now white needs to get his queen into the game. He plays the best move, queen f4, threatening to come down with either queen e5 or queen c7 check. Black says, I better get another piece into the defensive area. He brings the queen back to e8. Now Stockfish likes queen c7 check. And if king g8, then queen e5. Botvinnik plays queen e5 right away, and the value drops from 4.8 to about 2.5. He's still winning. In the book, they don't make any comment that white could do better on move 29. They just give queen e5. The authors say, considering how much danger he appeared to be in a few moves ago, it looks as if Capablanca has defended his position rather well. However, his next move, although very natural, allows a surprising combination that has become extremely famous. He plays queen e7, and in the book, they say, it is strange that the question of what happens if black avoids the combination has been largely ignored. Perhaps the assumption has been that black can do little active if he allows bishop a3, then the e-pawn will be too strong and white will make progress easily. However, things are not so simple as a well-timed knight a5 to c6 offers hope of counterplay. And now they say h6 is the critical move, and indeed you can see at the bottom here, Stockfish says h6 is the best move, but it also says it doesn't save the game. So let's look at that move for a minute. h6, and now they give the move queen c7 check in the book, and Stockfish says both queen c7 check and queen d6 win. All right, so queen c7 check, king g8 is given in the book, and now it looks like white should play queen d6, and they don't mention that move in the book, so they don't quite get the right idea. Queen d6 still leaves white ahead by about 3 pawns here. So queen d6 will play the move here. This book was written about 20 years ago. They did use computers, but Stockfish 14 is a lot better than what they had 20 years ago. They give b5, and now maybe queen h4 or queen e5. Let's see here. Looks like they're about the same. H4. Knight A5. Queen E5. Knight G4. Queen takes D5. Knight C6. Knight E4. And white has won his pawn back and he's making progress. He's about +3 here. All right, so let's go back to the game. So in the book, they say, hey, we're one of the first ones to really analyze H6 in any detail. And we could see that things aren't trivially easy for white. But after Capablanca's move, Queen E7, that gives white a deflection sacrifice. Now, at this point, when white was making the sacrifice, he has to look ahead and see what he can see. And it was always assumed that that Botvinnik saw all the way to the rest of the game. We're only on the 30th move, and the game went 41 moves. So they assumed that Botvinnik looked 12 moves ahead, and he saw that he was winning. And Botvinnik didn't say anything until right before he died, but I heard a report right before Botvinnik passed away that Botvinnik said, all right, I calculated this line, and I saw that I was threatening to win, and that the only thing that Capablanca could do was to try to get a perpetual check. And I analyzed it, and it seemed to me that I could get out of the perpetual check, but I didn't really analyze it all the way. It just looked really good. And I said to myself, okay, if I do this, I should be winning. But if for some reason I've miscalculated and Capablanca gets a draw, well, drawing with Capablanca isn't the worst thing that ever happened. So Botvinnik actually admitted that he wasn't 100% sure he would get out of the perpetual check at the end of the combination. But for a long time, people had assumed, Botvinnik saw the whole thing perfectly. So let's see the famous combination now. All right, so Botvinnik starts out by burning his bridges, and he plays bishop A3, which is a clearance sacrifice. All right, well, black's pretty much forced to take. He can't just sit and play defense anymore. For instance, suppose he plays queen to E8 now, then queen C7 check, king G8. Stockfish gives either queen E5, bishop E7, hitting the knight. If he tries to save the knight, let's say he plays, knight E4, knight takes, pawn takes, bishop F6, threatening mate, queen F8, E7, and white wins. All right, so back to the game. So Capablanca says, all right, show me. And he takes the bishop. And now Botvinnik sacrifices a second piece. He forks the knight and the king with knight H5 check. And now if black tries to move the king here, let's say king H6, then after knight F6, queen C1 check, king F2, queen D2 check, king G3. If he plays queen G5 check, this pawn's going to queen. But if he doesn't play queen G5 check, he can't get a perpetual. For instance, queen D3 check, king H4, and again, he has no choice. If he trades queen, well, he can't trade queens here because he loses the queen. And he doesn't have any more good checks here. If he had checked instead on, well, there's only really two safe checks. As I said, if queen check here, queen takes, king takes, Stockfish says, well, yeah, you can get a queen. You can also save the knight first with check, and white wins. All right, so back to the game. So Capablanca played the main line, which is to take the knight, and now Botvinnik gets to do removal of the guard with queen G5 check. The king can't continue to guard the knight. He's got to give him the knight with check. King F8, queen checks, king G8. He can't play king E8 because check and mate. Again, this is why you study basic easy time. Oops, mouse slip. Wouldn't want to do that. That would make the game famous. Checkmate. So he can't go that way, but he can go to G8 because queen F6 check, queen F7 check, followed by queen F8 is not mate. If your board vision doesn't see that the queen is guarding F8, That's the problem. So white doesn't have an immediate mate here, but what he has is an unstoppable threat to queen the pawn. So what he plays is just simply e7. And this is where he calculated, all right, black's got a bunch of checks here, but I think I can get out of it. And let's see what happens. Queen c1 check, king f2, queen c2 check, king g3, queen d3 check, king h4, queen e4 check. Notice that doesn't really stop the pawn because now the queen f8 is also a threat to mate. So black can't just do nothing at this point. He has to keep going for the perpetual. Throws in another check, king back. You're saying, is white repeating the position? No, he's getting rid of this pawn first. So that when queen e4 check, he can now push the pawn in the way. Queen e1 check, king up. And now there's no more safe checks. And black has no defense against the double threat of, well, the threat of queen f8 mate. If he plays h6, well, white, if worse comes to worse, white can just play queen g6 check, king h8, e8 queen check, and mate him in a couple moves here. Or, obviously, he could play queen checks here, king here, and now, you know, queen checks here, king h8, and then you get a queen with check, and so on. So, nothing could be done here. So, Capablanca resigned in this position. So that ending of the game is really famous. And the whole idea that black blocks off the queen side and then white lets white break with e4 happens in a lot of, you know, Nimzo kind of positions. It also happens even in people when they play the London or the Cole system. For instance, suppose you play a Cole system, d4, d5, knight f3, knight f6, e3, e6, bishop d3, c5, c4, knight c6, castle, bishop e7, knight bd2, and now black says, oh, I'll play c4. Well, I've got a few videos on this before, but what that does is take the pressure off the center so that you only have one more break in the center, but that break's hard to achieve because white's got 2 on it, and white has an unstoppable break with e4. So, for instance, if black castles, white can play e4 already, and look at the evaluation. White's up by 1.37. 1.1. So already, positionally, black is very, very close to being lost. You know, a lead of like 0.1 to 0.2 is a normal opening advantage. And here we've got up to over 1.2 right now. So that means black's done something terribly wrong. And what he did terribly wrong was play c4. Same thing in the London system. You get the same exact idea. Bishop f4, knight f3, knight f6, knight f3, e6, e3. Let's say black plays c5, c3, bishop e7, h3, so that on knight h5 you can preserve the bishop. Castle, bishop d3, knight c6, castle. And now c4 isn't as bad as it was in the Cole system, but it's still pretty bad. Let's see what happens. Right now, Stockfish says that black's position is 0.18. 0.26, and c4 right now is hanging in there as maybe not the best move, but fighting for the top 2 or 3. So it's not quite as bad because black has a little bit more pressure. But again, if black's not careful, let's say b5, knight bd2, a5, rook e1, black, let's say, goes for his break with b4, then white can play e4 here. That's the better break. His pieces are all in the center. He's got chances to attack on the king side. In these kind of positions, black almost always has to take. He can't really let white play e5, sort of like what happened in the Botvinnik game. So d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight d5, hitting the bishop. And white has a nice little advantage here. It's up to 0.75 now. Suggests bishop d2 to guard this pawn. Okay, so this idea that we saw in the Nimzo could happen in the Cole system. It could happen in the London. We saw in the London it wasn't quite as bad, but it still wasn't probably optimum. All right, so those are the things you can learn from going over these famous games. And I tell people to read instructive anthology game books. If you don't know where they are, you can go to my website, danheisman.com. Go to the pull-down menu More on the right. Go to recommended book lists, and the first list is the basic tactics books. The second list is the instructive anthology books. You know, those are the ones you could read. I sort of have them in rough order of easy to hard, starting with Logical Chess Move by Move. So, you know, as you get into the medium books, you're going to see this game probably more than once. Botvinnik-Capablanca AVRO 1938. Okay, as I say in all my videos, the best thing you can do is please tell all your chess friends about my channel. We just won the award for Best Instruction for one of my videos. Another one, honorable mention. My Twitter feed, my chess tip of the day at Dan Heisman on Twitter. Got best Twitter feed. I've had over 3,000 chess tips of the day. And if you'd like to like the video, great. And if you haven't subscribed, you can hit the subscribe button. Okay, hopefully you enjoyed today's game, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.